Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you, and today I'm bringing you an interview with Mike LePond of Symphony X, who also plays in Death Dealer, has his own band, Mike LePond's Silent Assassins, and has done a lot of other projects around the heavy metal world. So this interview is a lot of fun. Mike is a really, really talented musician and bass player, and I am really happy to bring this to you today. So with that said, here you go. Enjoy the interview with myself and Mike LePond from Symphony X. Mike, I welcome you to the Metal Command Podcast. It's the first time you've ever been here. And, you know, obviously I've been a longtime fan of yours, you know, being with Symphony X and just picking up these three pretty awesome CDs that I found that I was unfortunately stupid enough to overlook. But, you know, I'm really glad. You know what? I got to tell you something. You know, it's like everybody in Symphony X has their own projects and things that they do, and there's so much talent in that band. I mean, I think of the albums you've put out. I think of Michael Romeo's solo stuff, and then, you know, Russell Allen's doing all sorts of cool stuff with different people. So you guys always have something cool going on, and everybody does something different. That's my opinion anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think that's what makes us the band we are. Mm-hmm. Because all the guys, you know, we're a cohesive unit, but we all come from like different backgrounds, you know, like Russell comes from a background of just like, you know, classic hard rock singers, you know, Zeppelin and bands like that. You know, I come from the heavy metal, power metal world, and our drummer Jason is more of a jazz guy. Mike Piniella is like a classical pianist, and Romeo likes everything. Yeah. So you put it all together, and you know, it makes us special.
Yeah, it almost feels like, because I've talked to Michael and I've talked to Russell before on the show, and it's like you have five extremely different people in the band, but when you get together, it works really well. And, you know, it's interesting you categorize them in the way that you did, because if you go and listen to your stuff, it does have a little more of a power metal vibe to it. And these albums, they have more of that, more of a power metal vibe, where like, if you listen to like Russell Allen and some of the stuff he's done a lot of the more progressive or hard rock stuff. And then Michael is, again, you listen to his solo albums, it's all over the place. So it's kind of funny you said that, because I was thinking in my head, that was something I was thinking in my head earlier last week when I started listening to your Silent Assassin CDs. And so, you know, let's talk about this for a little bit. You know, we'll get into this, and then we'll talk about some of the other bands that you work with, one of which I'm wearing a shirt by. And you know, these Silent Assassins. So how did this whole thing get together? You know, Alan Tecchio is a phenomenal vocalist. I love his stuff in Hades and Watchtower. So the fact that he's your singer, and he does a phenomenal job on this. And one thing that's cool about it is, you know, like when I listen to Horror Babylon, for example, there's a lot of diversity to that album. You have stuff that's slower, that's more hard rock oriented. And you don't normally hear Alan sing that kind of stuff. And I think that, I think it really, his voice and his singing that he did on that specific album is one of the best things he's ever done.
Yeah. You know, I love Alan. I think his voice is, you know, I wish he would do 100 more projects, you know. I love his voice. Silent Assassins came about basically, I think, a couple of reasons. One reason was I noticed that I was sort of getting pigeonholed into being known as a progressive metal bass player. Mm-hmm. And actually, you know, that's really not true, because I never really was into progressive metal, and I don't even really consider Symphony X a progressive metal band. I mean, I liked bands like, you know, as far as progressive, I like, you know, Rush and Yes and ELP, the progressive rock. I was always more of just like a heavy metal, power metal guy, you know. Mm-hmm. So one thing I wanted to do is show people where I came from my influences. So, you know, my influences were, you know, Sabbath and Priest and Maiden and Metallica, and, you know, the whole bit. And so that was definitely one reason. And another reason was, you know, I had all these songs laying around that they really didn't fit Symphony X's style, you know. Maybe they were a little too simple, you know, or just, you know, or just maybe weren't dark enough or that kind of thing. So it was really a way for me also to get those songs out of my head and onto a CD. And lyrically, a lot of the lyrics on those records that I did, I originally wrote for Symphony X, but they just kind of got lost in the shuffle. So sure. I just use it all up, and here it is. And I had a blast doing it. It was great to just like have something that was just me doing everything. It was stressful but fun.
Absolutely. And you know, what is going on with Symphony X? I know you guys did some shows. Do you guys plan on writing another album and making a record at all anytime soon?
Yes. I know the last record was 2015, and I can't believe it's been that long ago. But you know, with after the pandemic stuff was done and bands were playing again, and we finally went back on the road, I can tell you right now that Michael Romeo is working on music for the Symphony X record. And I'm looking forward to hearing some of his ideas, diving into it, and, you know, doing another one. Can't wait.
Yeah. You know, I can honestly tell you, Michael's a really cool dude. And I can tell you that my experience with him, you know, it's funny because I met you guys, man, I was a lot younger back then, but when you guys toured with Blind Guardians, that was quite a long time ago. But, you know, Michael, I had never had him on a show until his first solo album, but I can tell you that, and people that have never encountered him, he is literally one of the best people I've ever had on the show for quite a few reasons. But it's nice to hear that, because I'll be honest with you, it doesn't seem like that Symphony X album came out that long ago, but you're right, 2015. And it was a phenomenal record. But I think when everybody gets involved with so much other stuff, you know, you sort of just don't think about it until one day you wake up and like, oh my God, it's been 7 years, and which is quite a long time. But, you know, I saw you guys were out playing shows and writing stuff. I got to talk to you about another thing, Death Dealer. So doing a Death Dealer thing. So as you may or may not know, I know those guys really well. And, you know, Sean's a good friend of mine. Stu is a good friend of mine. Talk about how you got involved with them, because I was really excited to see they brought you on board to play bass with them.
Yeah. Stu is, he's such a nice, good human being, and he's such a talented guy. So it's really been a pleasure, you know, getting to know him. I've only met Sean, unfortunately, one time. So I've only done recordings with Death Dealer, but the way I got into it was through Ross the Boss, because he is a member of Death Dealer as well. Yeah. And, you know, just from playing with Ross, he's the one who told me, you know, there's a position open in Death Dealer. We'd like to get you in there. And at that time, I hadn't heard Death Dealer yet. But once I did, I was like, wow, this is awesome. This is an awesome band. This is awesome music. And so I was only too happy to join. You know, the music was right up my alley. And, you know, Stu's been great to me, and Sean's been awesome to me. Total pros. And it'd be great to play live with those guys at some point. You know, I know Stu is in Australia, makes it kind of tough, but it would be great. You know, I'm totally happy with that band. Love jamming with them.
Yeah. You know, I can tell you the one cool thing, you know, I've made some music with Stu in the past, and I can tell you that he is literally probably one of the coolest and nicest people to work with. And it's like when he writes a song, it's like you could automatically just, man, I already know what I can play on this to make it, you know, sound good. It's like he has this vision of like what you're capable of, and you go in and do it. And at least for me, it was like that. What was it like for you when he would send you a song? Was it easy for you to come up with stuff for it, and maybe talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, Stu writes music that just hits me right in the core, and I love the songs, and it's like the bass lines. When I listen to Stu's stuff, the bass lines kind of just write themselves. Because you're like, okay, here's the Geezer Butler part. Okay, I'll do that. Here's the Steve Harris part. Okay, I'll do that. And it just, it's the songs are not simple, but they just feel really easy to put together. And I could just knock them out 1, 2, 3. And
sure.
He's been happy with what I've been doing. And so, yeah, he's a machine. He's got all these other different projects going on at once. He could write so many songs. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah, he actually gave me a song to use as background music for the show, so it was really cool. And he's one of those people that is always very supportive of the community. If that makes any sense. In all seriousness, the guy is like, if you get to know him, and it's sad that a lot of the stuff he's done really hasn't been more popular, or hasn't really received a lot of the recognition that he's done, going back to the Empires of Eden stuff to, even Death Dealer, I think should be bigger band than what it is. I mean, that's my opinion. But those guys are cool. And when I found out you were jamming with them and doing some stuff with them, I was pretty excited about that. I have to admit to you that it was really cool to see you get into that lineup, because, I don't know Ross that well, but I know Stu and Sean. And I just, in my opinion, I'm like, man, this guy will fit right in with those guys. And it's a really cool thing to see.
Absolutely. And it's true. Everything was just so comfortable. The music, it's like exactly the kind of music I love and I love to be a part of. So, those guys are awesome. And you're right. I Stu should be known as, one of the top metal guitar players out there, and hopefully someday he'll get to that. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit more about these records. So, it's interesting. I listened to all 3 of them when I've gotten them, and and the thing that's crazy is that they differ quite a bit. I look at the first album, and like out of the gate, you just pretty much nailed it. I mean, it was just like a straight up, pretty much straight ahead power metal album. And then, you get to the second album, Pawn and Prophecy. And it's interesting because for some reason, when you go online and I talk to people about this album, people don't bring this one up as much. I don't know why that is. People usually bring the first and third album up, but this was really kind of cool. It almost felt like it was some kind of concept album, at least from the short time I listened to it. And then this one, Horror of Babylon, was a little more, I'd say probably the most diverse out of all of them, in my opinion. Because when you're listening to Telltale Heart, then you go into Ironborn, which is straight ahead, just in your face power metal. But then, Ides of March. I mean, it varies so much. And, the first album, when you did it, talk about making this first one. I mean, obviously the debuts are usually considered, the least favorite of most people, but, all of these really were pretty much straight ahead. I mean, you saw the comments on my Facebook page. Everyone's like, these are like some of the best metal albums they've ever heard. I mean, there wasn't one negative comment about them. So, so talk about making this first album and what it was like going in and doing this, outside of Symphony X, which obviously a lot of people knew you for.
Yeah. It was, definitely, it was scary because this was going to be the first time where I was the songwriter, the producer, and I had to oversee everything, and I had to find the band, so it was scary. And this is perfect time to talk about Alan Tecchio. The singer was the most important part. I was talking to some singers here and there. Maybe I would send them a demo. They would send me something back, and sounded okay, sounded good, but still, I was like, wow, a lot of these guys were overseas, and I was like, I really would like to be in the studio with the singer to, just to work with him,
Mm-hmm.
And then, I just thought about Alan Tecchio because I had played with him a few years back in a band called Seven Witches. And, and that's where I first heard his voice. And he was always in the back of my mind. So, I sent the stuff to Alan, and, Alan I knew was great, and he didn't need an audition. If he wanted to, he got it. So he liked everything. And basically I sent him the lyrics, and even though I'm not a singer, I sent him the melodies I was hearing for the vocals, and we were going to record in Michael Romeo's studio. So he comes down totally prepared, like did his homework, total pro, and he came down and he just blew me away. I was like, wow, this guy just sounds exactly like I envisioned it, because he had the grit that I was looking for, the tough guy grit, but then he could also sing, he could also sing with nice soaring melodies.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, this sounds so good. And I was like, okay, so that was taken care of. As far as the rhythm guitar, I just figured since I wrote the songs, let me try to just do the rhythm guitar. And if there was something that I couldn't play, I just gave the guitar to Romeo and he just played it. So, I mean, he was just so helpful. Romeo, he's obviously a keyboard player too. So he put in a lot of the keys, and he did some of the solos for me. So he was just, imagine Michael Romeo just helping you that much. I mean, how can you fail,
Absolutely. I understand.
Right. So it came out really great. And the feedback I got, I was so happy with. Did it sell well? No. But, it's okay. It was a great experience to do. And, just from an artist perspective, it just felt so good to get that kind of music out there and let people know that, this is the stuff I write. And this is, and the other aspect was the bass, on the Symphony X records, a lot of the bass, it's got to be laid back because the music is very complicated and
sure.
And there's so much going on. So you got to lay back. But with, my solo stuff, I, cranked the bass up like Iron Maiden and just let it fly. And it felt great.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you talked about it not selling well. So I can attest to this. This is something I talk about on the podcast, and what I've talked about on the radio show is that it's real easy to miss something like this, because I followed Symphony X for 20 years. And wow. I knew that even over 20 years. In fact, I think I bought Twilight in Olympus as an import for like $25 back in like 1999, I mean, but the thing is, what happens, back then, I've been doing this almost 25 years. And back then, about once a week, you get mail in a week, but I'd get probably 2 or 3 promos a week, so I'd say a month, maybe 3 to 5 promos, let's say it that way. It could be 15 to 20 albums that I get. Now I have all of these publicists, my email box, I probably open it up, and there are at least 50 promos a week of stuff that I will never be able to listen to. And what happens is there's so much stuff out there because recording's a little more cost effective and a lot easier to do than say it would have been 25 years ago. And it's easy to miss stuff like this. Like I put it on a list. Like when the debut album came out, I had it listed as, okay, I'm gonna go check this out. And it can get so crazy you don't. And I don't know what it was. I woke up one day and I'm like, Mike's got these albums and I've never listened to them before. I'd even go on YouTube to listen to them. I just bought them. And then I posted that I bought them and everybody's commenting about how great they are. And I'm like, man, boy, did I miss out. And I run into albums like that. So I think it's not the fact that the music really isn't great. I think that you just became part of the numbers game where it's, unfortunately you just get oversaturated with stuff.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And, I've heard that from many people. A lot of people, they say, oh, we've loved Symphony X, but we never heard of, we never heard of this album. And, but that's fine. I still love doing it. And, I want to keep doing it.
Yeah. As soon as the first song on this debut album came on, probably about a minute and a half, 2 minutes into it, I'm like, dude, I'm going to like this stuff. And it's been like that. So now, there's the old saying in the music business, you have an eternity to write the debut album, but you don't have a long time to really write the follow-up. The follow-up is always the key one. And then you had Pawn and Prophecy. So I guess I'm going to ask you, was this a concept record? And for some reason, I don't know why that is. I don't really think it differs greatly from the other ones, but it almost seems like this one gets overlooked quite a bit, where Whore of Babylon seems to have gotten a lot of press, or a lot of people that talked about it. So maybe talk about making the second record, coming off of this first one that you were excited about, but you're making this second album now.
Yeah. And it's weird. The second album got picked up by Frontiers. So I thought that would get, tons of press,
Yeah.
So making the second record, I had used up a lot of my ideas on the first album, and I had a few songs left over, but I knew I had to write a bunch of stuff too. Now the long song on that record was originally, I had written it for Symphony X, but it kind of, the lyric part of it, but it kind of got lost in the shuffle. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it myself. And I always wanted to try to do a 20-minute song, and I took it as a challenge. So that was that one. And I think that album came out about 4 years after the first one. Mm-hmm. Symphony X did some touring, I think, during that time, and then I wanted to get started. But actually, I expected a great reaction, because it's weird how the artist thinks how a song is going to be received, and then how it's actually received. Like, I thought the first two songs on that record were two of the best songs I've ever written. And the first one was this big sing-along. I thought it was going to be like, a really popular song.
Yeah.
And, it didn't really turn out the way I thought. And then the second song, I actually made a video for, and I thought it was a real cool kind of Judas Priest vibe kind of tune.
Yeah, absolutely.
Had some other songs, and then we had another song on there called I Am the Bull. I thought that was a really cool, dark, slow plodding tune. So I really thought the album would be received very well. And I guess in the end, it kind of sold about the same as the first. But I was still very proud of it in the end.
Yeah. So I Am the Bull is my favorite song, at least as of now, on the record. Just so you know.
There you go. Cool.
Upon the first reaction, of course, I haven't really, the thing is, I don't like to really make final judgment calls on records. Sometimes people wonder, they ask me, why do you take so long to review stuff? Because I don't sit there and listen to 30 seconds of each song. I actually go and actually listen to the album in its entirety, to really kind of absorb it. So it usually takes me an extra couple weeks, but we'll find out. I'll figure that out. Maybe I'll message you and I'll be like, all right, this is actually my favorite track. But right now, that song was the one that grabbed me on Pawn and Prophecy. So now we get into Whore of Babylon. Now this is the album that I heard quite a bit about. Now, I don't know if it's because it came out in 2020 and people weren't working and people just there wasn't as much stuff coming out. But I remember talking about this and saying, there are going to be bands that do not have a huge audience, but I think 2020, because so many these other acts are holding their releases back, whoever puts an album out this year is going to really going to benefit, especially if they're a smaller group, because people, they don't have anything to do. Everything's closed. Right. So this came out and I heard a lot about this album, and this one seemed to be, when I talk to people, they seem to say this is their favorite one. And I'm curious because to me, it's a little more diverse than the other records are. I mean, you go from full blown speed metal to stuff that's completely almost like hard rock type stuff. And talk about making this one.
Yeah. So, I guess right after the second record, Symphony X still wasn't doing much. So I wanted to just jump right into a third one. I was so excited about writing and just putting out, classic heavy metal. So I started now for this one. At this point, from the original songs that I had written back in 2014, I maybe only had about one or two laying around left.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these were just kind of just written, right up to date when the album came out. And, again, it was just all dark topics. And, I always wanted to put some diversity into the records. I think some of the diversity you're hearing is somewhere along the line, I became a big fan of Blackmore's Night. And,
okay.
Their style of just folky medieval kind of vibe going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so definitely some of that is on there. The title track, Horror Babylon, I wanted to try an experiment where there's no guitar on it, on that song at all. It's an 8-string bass, a 4-string bass, and just some keys and Alan's vocals. So that was kind of like a thing I always wanted to try,
Sure.
So yeah, there's definitely some experimental things on there. But when I was done making it, I really felt like Alan Tecchio kicked ass on it. And I felt that it was a really strong record. And that album came out on a label called Silver Lining out of the UK.
Sure.
And they were great people. They were so nice to me. They paid for a couple of really good lyric videos for some of the songs that came out really, really cool. And they did promote me and they helped me in every way they could. So, so it did what it did. And, but I was really happy in the end. A lot of the songs I felt maybe were, a lot of the songs were the same like the other stuff, but some were different, like I guess like all records. So, I was definitely thrilled about it.
Yeah, and I would agree with you on that because when I listened to them in order to get a little bit of a better perspective on these things, and it was I like to do that because to get the reaction of, okay, this is kind of how these albums came out. And I'll be honest with you, the Horror Babylon is probably my favorite one out of the three. I mean, it's just the way it is. But I sort of like them in succession, meaning that I would probably say the debut is my least favorite. The second one is after that, and they get better as they go along, is my opinion. But, it just seems like the songwriting becomes more refined as the albums progress. And that is one of the things that I really noticed about this stuff here. And it's interesting. You brought something up. You played with Ross the Boss for a little bit, and he's a really phenomenal guitar player. And what was it like playing in the band with him?
Well, yeah, I was always a very big Manowar fan growing up, in high school and college. Yeah. And Joey DeMeo was always one of my big influences. So it was weird, it was kind of surreal because of what, I remember just like playing Manowar songs in my room, with the door shut and, and then all these years later, I'm playing the same songs. I look over and there's like, the guy, so it was really cool playing. I think the most interesting thing about playing with Ross was I used to go see Manowar back in the day.
Yeah.
And I'd be in the audience, really excited watching the band. And you see the band up there playing it, giving it all. And this time I was able to actually see it from the stage. I could see the cult following that they really had and how devoted, the fans are to, especially the older stuff, big devotion in Europe, especially.
Yeah.
You see how much more popular Manowar is in Europe than the US. So anytime Ross went over to Europe, the fans would come out. The shows would just be, total full of energy. So, it was definitely a great experience. And I got to meet a lot of metal fans that I would never have met from Symphony X, because a lot of those fans had never even heard of Symphony X.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting you bring that up because, most what you would consider power metal bands, I don't really, like I said, I mean, Symphony X was a little more prog oriented, probably back in their early days, when you go to like the Mythology Suite and stuff like that. But then they basically more morphed into a more progressive power metal. That's probably the best way to put it. But it's interesting when you say that, because usually bands like that are more popular in Europe than the US, but I've noticed with them, with you guys, it's not quite like that. They actually have a really good following here, but in Europe, if you talk to people about them, they're not, I don't know what it is. It feels like their fan base is a little more evened out, where, really popular European bands will come here and they can't sell 300 tickets, but they'll play to like 15,000 people over there, and then vice versa. It's weird. So, the demographics of your fan base has always intrigued me, because there are certain bands that are from here that for whatever reason they don't resonate in Europe as much, but their US fan base is a little bit bigger, which is actually, in my opinion, for a band like you guys, is a little more difficult to win people over here, which I always thought was interesting.
Yeah, it is true. I remember when we went over to Europe for the first time, and we were playing these metal festivals. So my first time going to one of these festivals was about 2001. Mm-hmm. And, at that time, heavy metal in the USA, you didn't even hear about it. It was like grunge, alternative. So at that time, I'm thinking metal is just, it's like, it's dead, I think, but when I got to Europe, I realized that all those bands that I used to like in the 80s still had careers in Europe, and they were flourishing. And there were newer bands that were just amazing, that I had not heard of. So, Europeans, I think, are more loyal to their, to the music. I think the USA tends to be more trendy. Now, we're very lucky because we have not only do we have a nice fan base in Europe, in most countries, there's some countries where we don't do well. Like Germany, we don't do well. Mm-hmm. I guess they're not big fans of anything that's kind of on the progressive side. But overall, we do real well. And in the US, the last tour we just did in May and June, it was probably our best tour we've done. Not one show under 500 people, nice little theaters. And it was just great. So, we're lucky that we do have a very loyal following. Not many bands could, not release a record in 7 years and still do really well. So we're really lucky in that respect.
Again, I just remember seeing you guys play with Blind Guardian in that tour so many years ago. And the thing was, I remember interviewing Hansi from Blind Guardian back in 1998. And I was like his fourth ever interview over here, because they didn't even have a record deal or any distribution here. And finally they come over here, and then I had seen you guys for the first time. I would like to say it wasn't the Mythology Suite, it was the album after that. And that was really when you sort of morphed into that more power metal sound, in my opinion, and it started going that route. And a lot of people knew who you were. And I remember coming to the show, I think it was here in Cleveland, and I'm like, I think more people knew who you were than Blind Guardian at the time, which I thought was interesting. And you've always had a pretty strong fan base here. And it's actually kind of a nice thing to see for once, as opposed to it usually being the other way around.
True. It's usually the other way around. Yeah. Yeah, we're just really lucky. We always had a good, we just always had a good, a good response. Maybe, it could be because maybe there's not a lot of bands in that genre, there's just like, there's Dream Theater and then us, and, maybe that was one of the reasons, I don't know.
Sure.
But that tour was actually 20 years ago on the Odyssey tour that we did. And that's and then we did the Gigantour in a few years later that would kind of helped us. But yeah, we're very lucky that we got a steady following, and be great to tour Blind Guardian again.
Yeah. Something else that you recently, played with and played on was, you did this project or band called Everdon, which I came across probably, I think it had come out. I had actually had a publicist send me a promo. I don't know. It said that you were on it. I'm like, I'll check it out. But it was actually kind of cool. It's a little bit different than some of the stuff you've done. And talk about that album. That came out, I think, February of 2021. So it's a pretty recent release. And it was something that really sort of surprised me because it's much different than the stuff that you've done anywhere else.
Yeah, it's something, those guys were all like just good friends of mine that lived near my house. And, we just knew each other from the scene. And, those guys were always all into like female fronted operatic stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And there just happened to be a time where they had no bass player. And I was like, well, let me check it out, and I was like, yeah, well, I think I could put some cool stuff to this, and, so I did it. I'm technically, not a part of the band anymore, now that I moved to Florida.
Sure.
But they're still going. And I know they're going to have another new record out that I did play on that one too. But they have another bass player in the lineup as well. But yeah, it's just another bucket list thing to check.
Absolutely. So you moved to Florida. I don't know why I thought you didn't live down there, but apparently you did move down there. So how you like it down there? Is it different? It seems like it's always a different culture anytime you go down there.
Yeah. Well, I lived in New Jersey my whole life.
Yeah.
And so moving down to Florida, I guess it wasn't that different because it seemed like a lot of people from New York and New Jersey have moved down here.
Yeah.
So it wasn't all that different. The only thing different is, there's a few months out of the year where it's like super hot, which I don't mind at all, so, but it's cool. I'm getting used to it and meeting some new friends and, I miss my old friends at home, but that's life. You move on and it's full of different challenges for you.
So you have worked with some really great people music wise. And if you had to pick somebody else that you could work with that you haven't yet, who would it be?
That's a really excellent question. Somebody who I'd like to work with. I'm trying to think of like singers, guitar players. Yeah, that's a really tough question. I would I would like to take a crack at, writing for, one of these bands that are really, really big. You know what I mean? Like, say, I'd like to take a crack at maybe writing like maybe a Bruce Dickinson solo album or something like that, something like that.
Yeah.
Something cool like that. I'm sure that'll never happen.
Sure.
But, something, like a really big artist. And I'd like to try to, write some cool heavy metal riffs for them.
Sure. It's interesting. Have you, as long as you've been playing bass, have you ever done anything that wasn't heavy metal? Is there anything that, you've ever tried or wanted to try, that, kind of goes outside of the genre itself?
Sure. Yeah, something pops right into my mind. So I'm thinking maybe about 7 years ago or so, right? I get contacted by the original guitar player for Enough's Enough.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this guy, is like a total Beatles, style guitar player. And I never did that stuff, but I'm well versed at that kind of stuff. Like, I'm really well versed in like old hard rock and classic rock. And he asked me if I would play on a few songs of his. So he sent me the songs and they were it was like total like Paul McCartney and, total Lennon McCartney.
Sure.
And I saw it as like, as like a challenge, and I played on it and it was just fun to have all that stuff that was locked in my brain come out. And he really liked it a lot. And to this day, I think it's been released, but I'm just not sure when or where. But it was cool, to try different things like that. I'm trying to think of anything else that I might have done. No, that was probably the the most outside of metal thing I've ever done. It was fun.
Now, when you were, playing some of these shows with Symphony X, was it, to me, for the longest time, musicians were like the only people out of work, right? I mean, everybody else went back to work, but all these venues had all these strict rules and stuff like that. Was it more difficult to play these shows, or was it, were there really not a lot of restrictions for you? Was it easy to go out and do this again? And do you think, a lot of your turnout maybe could have been people that were just, man, I want some live music, and they decided to come out?
Oh, yeah. When we finally did get to go out, so you're talking May of 2022, mm-hmm. I'd say like 95% of the restrictions were gone.
Sure.
I'd say the venue that had the most restrictions was in Portland, Oregon, and they had a lot of restrictions that I wasn't happy with it. I didn't like it, but we played the show. But beyond that, it was pretty much all okay. And then when we went to South America, the restrictions were pretty much gone as well,
Right.
And I think you're definitely right about the people who were just so cooped up at home and they just wanted to come out, and that was really good to see. It's really good to see that people are just putting aside any fears they may have of whatever and just come out and have a good time. And, it was a great experience, I think, for them and us as well.
No, absolutely. Well, I can tell you what, man, I'm really looking forward to what Symphony X is coming out. And then obviously when you're between albums, I definitely like to hear another one of these come out, because this is some really great stuff. I have to tell you that as soon as I listen to these, I'm like, I got to get this guy in my show, in all seriousness, because these records were just from the first album all the way. I listened to all three of them the same night. It was just like a marathon while I was doing work. And, when I work my normal job, it's funny because I have a lot of time to listen to music. And so I was able to absorb a lot of these, pretty quickly. But, I do appreciate you coming on. I really do. This has been, it's really cool to finally kind of see you face to face. Hopefully, we'll meet at a show at some point, but definitely these records definitely deserve a little more recognition than what they've received. And I think you've done some great work on this in all seriousness.
Well, I really appreciate that coming from you. You're like a metal connoisseur. I follow a lot of things you do, and your stuff. So I really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to doing the new Symphony X record. And then I'm going to wait till that's done. And then once Michael Romeo's hands are freed up, then we'll get another Assassins record. And, in the meantime, I'm always doing projects. There's an album coming out. As a matter of fact, there's an album coming out, I believe it's tomorrow or Friday, by a band called Mentalist. And
Mentalist.
They're a German power metal band, kind of in the vein of Halloween. And I played on that record. Really cool stuff. And another album just came out recently that I did, a band called Cauldron Born.
I remember those guys. Yeah.
So their latest record, I played on that. So, in the meantime, I'm kind of all over the place. You never know where I'm going to pop up, but I'd be happy to come on anytime, man. Thank you again.
Yeah. Cauldron Born. I remember they sent me an album when I first started my show. I mean, that was a long time ago. And,
wow. That's cool. Yeah. They just got a new one out. And real, like, pure-blooded, true heavy metal,
Oh, yeah.
Really, really interesting stuff. And, so like I said, I'll be keeping busy while I'm waiting for the Symphony X to happen, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah. So I got a story for you right after this, but I'll tell you off air. But it was great to have you on, man. And, again, phenomenal job on these records. I can't wait for the new Symphony X. I'm really excited for it. And, really great group of people that you play with in that band, in all seriousness.
Thank you so much.